Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Becoming Secure with Mike's Mindset. Today, I am interested in sharing more about my faith journey with you guys. Having faith in God has helped me get through the darkest moments of my life, and I want to encourage other people to attempt seeking solace with God because I was a woman who didn't have faith or lived a life as a woman who had faith until very recently. And it's been an incredibly beautiful journey, and it's made me into the woman that I am today, a woman that I am incredibly proud of. I want to encourage other people to listen to this episode simply to maybe grasp the idea and see if it can be comprehensible, something you can relate to, and something that might be helpful to you. And to help me do that today, I am joined by David Pasqualone, a man whose life has been marked by incredible challenges and equal incredible fate. In part one, David and I talk about his story and the lessons God has taught him through hardship and healing. And it's an honest conversation between two people learning what it really means to be walking with God. So, welcome to another episode of Becoming Secure with Mike's Mindset. First of all, I'm just so excited that I get to talk with you today. The little I know about you based on your profile has already brought my attention, and I'm super excited to talk to you. I would love for you to introduce yourself to my listeners and just speak a little bit to what got you here. Like, who are you and who am I talking to today?
All right, so I'm David Pasqualone. I'm host of the Remarkable People podcast. I have my own sales and marketing consulting company, Ascend. You can find everything I do at davidpasqualone.com. And we have the same goals in every area: glorify God and help people grow. And we use ourselves as guinea pigs to do so. So when we help people, they have an easier time of it. So that's it. My heart really is just to love God, serve God, and hopefully please Him, and then to help as many people as I can along the way.
Yeah, I love that. And that is also one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on my podcast, because as much as I am religious, I don't necessarily speak too much to God in my practice of religion on my podcast, but I do reference religion sometimes. But I do want to have more of an episode where we're talking about how faith has played a role in our lives. So if you could just kind of share a little bit of your faith journey, is this something that's kind of been alongside of you your whole life, or were you introduced to kind of the concept of religion at a later point in life? Or what does that look like for you?
So I grew up first generation American outside of Boston in a town called Milford, Mass. So my family is all from Italy, and everybody believed in God. And, most of the family went to a Catholic church. But from the time I was born, my mom actually got involved in this cult, like this really weird church. So I heard my grandmom, from birth to five, talking about the Catholic religion. I watched crazy people at the church my mom would take me to for the first 5 years. But I always believed there was a God. I just didn't know who God was until I was at 12. I actually heard a sermon by evangelist Tim Lee. And he just talked about what is hell, what is heaven, how you can know for sure that you're going to spend eternity with God. And I went down and I asked God to save me. And it says, for whosoever should call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. So I did. But from 12 to 15, I had like tons of problems and issues in life, and it was just building. And I had all these insecurities, and I really didn't even understand what I did when I was 12. But when I was 15, I actually started thinking I was losing my mind. And looking back now, I think they were what people would consider anxiety attacks. And I started having them when I was 15, but something inside of me said, you need to go to that church. There's that pastor who's always coming around. You guys are playing basketball. He's always knocking on your door. He's always inviting you to youth group. You need to go see him. So I remember waking my mom up at like 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I'm like, Mom, I think I'm going crazy. She's like, what? And she's like, you're bothering me. Like, you're waking me up. I'm like, well, can you take me to church tomorrow? Because I was 15, I couldn't drive yet. She's like, yeah, I'll take you to church, but I'm not going. So when I was 15, first time I went to church, I didn't know the difference between a Bible and a hymnal. And I don't know how it is in Norway, but in school in America, when you have a question, you raise your hand. So we're in this small church outside of Boston, and the pastor's speaking, and I didn't know any better. So I just raised my hand all through this guy's service. And then I'd go Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday. I was just trying to learn as much as I could. I knew there was something there, that truth. And then finally, he put his arm around me one day. We were walking after a youth group about 2 months in. So you're talking like, 20 services I was at, just disrupting this poor man's services. He never said a word. Nobody in the church said a word. And he's like, Dave, he's like, sadly, we don't have a lot of men in our church with the time to disciple young men such as yourself. He's like, but I have a friend over in Franklin, a couple towns over. He's like, would you like to meet with him a day or two a week and he'll disciple you? And I'm like, yeah, that sounds good, but what's disciple? And he said, basically, he answers your questions out of the Bible. I'm like, oh, yeah, I love that. So at that point, that's where I got my assurance of salvation. I really understood what God did, what Jesus did, how the Holy Ghost indwells in us, once we trust him. And then I grew as a Christian. So at 15, my entire life changed. That doesn't mean I haven't had issues or problems or struggles or pain, but since that point in my life, I've always had peace and this confidence that God's with me. And he doesn't do anything negative. He doesn't do anything that causes us pain, but sometimes he allows it because ultimately it benefits us.
Right. That is such a beautiful story. And thank you so much for sharing that with me. And I guess that's kind of what I've been hearing lately too is that, well, it doesn't say that you won't ever suffer in the Bible because people will want to ask, why are so many bad things happening in the world? Like, how can God allow it? It's not that you're not ever to suffer in life. It's just throughout whatever it is that you are faced with, you're never alone and you can find peace in the presence of God, even in the midst of chaos. And I think that's kind of the message that I want to continue to deliver as well, because I do find so much value in my relationship with God, which in my sense too started later in life. I was kind of an adult when I started like practicing religion on a daily. It was kind of a recent find of mine after the pandemic, actually. But it's definitely played a big role in my life, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about like if you have any specific stories. I would love to hear your favorite story to tell.
Man, that's so much and so much time, but there is one story I might, it's hard for me to tell without crying. So just got emotional thinking about it. But one thing is, God knows everything in our lives, everything that's happened, everything that's happened, everything that will happen. So one thing that just I didn't have people like necessarily telling me what to do or what to think or do this and don't do that. I had a sincere relationship with God. I'd pick up my Bible and I'd read. I'm like, God, show me what you want me to learn. And then I do my best to apply it. And I go back and forth, back and forth. And when we read our Bible, God speaks to us. When we pray, we speak to him. And it's just during the day, you can even have like conversational prayer with God. So one thing, whether you're, 12 years old, 22 years old, or 82 years old, it's be real and be honest. So God knows the truth. Why are you lying? Like you shouldn't lie to other people. You shouldn't lie to yourself. And it really is foolish to try to lie to God, right? So be really transparent, be really real, be honest. And no matter what happens, like you said, everything really does happen for a reason. Like when people get angry, like, it's hard. There's some things that are so hard. Like, why did God allow a child to get a disease? Why did God allow a child to be born crippled? Why did God blank? Why did God allow blank? People can take any hardship, but every single one of them goes back to Satan, not to God. God gives us the strength to get through it. Satan doesn't have the power to do anything that God doesn't allow. And there's been times in my life where I'm like, God, why did you allow this? I was asking God a question, not questioning God. When we question God or our parents or anybody over us in authority, that's like wrong, right? But asking honest questions, that's right. So we have to remember, like, disease came from Satan. He tricked Adam and Eve. Any one of us would have been deceived, and they went for it out of the lust of their heart. Eve to follow Satan and to have what she was told not to, and Adam because he loved Eve and chose her more than God, right? So we're all sinful. We all have a sinful nature. But what has to be crystal clear, like, I've been critically ill 3 times in my life. And it wasn't like, oh, a few days. It was years at a time in agony every day. At one point when I was in my 30s, I wasn't praying to get through a day. I would literally be praying to get through an hour. Just let me live one more hour, God. So there's been hardships and there's been struggles, and people have way harder stories than me. But what I really want to make clear is even if you had the most brutal childhood or life or the worst thing that can be imagined, you have to acknowledge that is all Satan. That is 100% Satan, 100% the demons that fell, 100% them trying to get you to hate God when God is there to love you, protect you, give you comfort. And even if this short life of average 70 years is terrible, you have the rest of eternity in perfection and rejoicing and joy and peace. So Satan's always trying to mess up our head. And it's like a kid. Satan wants kids to be rebellious and think bad about their parents. So then they lose respect for what the parent's saying. So the kid does stupid things and ruins their life. And then by the time they figure it out, they've already done a ton of damage, right? They can be forgiven, but the consequences sometimes last. So to answer your question, going through my life, I've had highs, I've had lows, I've had financial, wins, financial losses, illness that was incredibly painful. I had doctors tell me, multiple doctors telling me, make up my will, get my affairs in order. Went through a brutal divorce, tons of betrayals on every side, just so many things. But I always knew God was with me. God loves me and he's not vindictive. God is not doing things to hurt me. He doesn't have to. He could blink and wipe all the planets off the solar system, right? He's not doing anything to hurt me or to hurt you or to hurt any of our listeners. He's allowing it so we get stronger and love him more and love ourselves more and love other people more. So that's a whole lot of information, but you said you wanted me to share a single story that might illustrate.
Yes, absolutely. I would love that. I do love how you do talk about religion and how easily you make it like flow. It is very easy for me to grasp every concept that you're presenting. And I do like the stories that you're sharing from the Bible to kind of create parallels too. So I just wanted to acknowledge that I really like your storytelling technique, but I would love to hear what your favorite story to tell is.
Oh, thanks. The good news is it's not technique. I'm not that smart. It's just how I'm wired. I'm just telling you the truth, right? So one story, and there's so many. I mean, there really are so many, and so many moments of just seriously joyful but there's ones that popped in my head, so that's what I'll share. So I remember when I was in college, I always wanted from a child to have a family and to be a great husband and father. And, once I get saved, I want to glorify God. I want to be a great husband and father. But I was afraid to get married because I didn't have money and I wanted to be able to take care of my family and my future family. And I didn't believe, and I still don't believe in debt, right? The only thing that I personally will finance, and some of it might change, but to date, the only thing personally like finance is a home because that's an investment and you're leveraging the money. But at the same time, I do hate carrying a mortgage. I just know I can use the rest of the money better. So, people can argue that Dave Ramsey versus another financial advisor, but I hate debt. And I believe you live within your means. If they're meager, you live within meager means. If they're great, you save and you invest and you make sure, you're the servant with talents that took the five and made more, not the one who buries it, right? So whether it's your ability talent or whether your financial talent, you need to reinvest it. So I have always, and it is to the point of a flaw where I worry about money. So I didn't want to get married because I didn't feel like I could take care of a wife. Well, all these things happened. I ended up getting married. And when we were first married, there was this gap between when we moved back to Pensacola and when I started my first full-time job. Like, cause I was still going to college full-time and then I got a full-time job. And then later down the road, I started a side business and everything. But this was the gap where there was nothing, right? There was just nothing in there. And I saved up as much as I could. And we are down to like nothing. And I had a credit card, Maggie, but what I do is, and I still do, is I use the credit card, I pay in full each month. I use the credit card, I pay it full each month. And we didn't have money for groceries. So I didn't want to stress my wife out at the time. And I didn't want to say anything. And I'm like, God, I've done my best. Like I'm thinking to myself, I'm praying. I'm like, God, I've done my best. You say you always provide. I'm kind of all choked up. You say you'll always provide. And I don't know what to do. We need groceries. So when I swipe that credit card, that's debt. And I don't have the money to pay it. I'm like, can you please help me? So no joke. We go, I tell my wife, at that time I was married for 24 years or yeah, but this was, we were newly weds, whatever it's called. I'm like, hey, just buy what we need. Don't buy anything extra. Just buy what we need and I'll figure it out. So she shops and goes through and it rings, rings, rings. And as we're standing in the checkout line, I look down, there's two people in front of us checking out, and I just see money on the ground. So I bend down and pick it up. And I'm like, who dropped this? And I didn't even look. I just had it in my hand. And the first person, we live in Pensacola, Florida. So you're not wearing like coats and layers of clothes or whatever, right? Like where you could put your hand in your pocket with your gloves on and money falls out. So I'm looking. Nobody's dropped anything. Nobody's looking for anything. And then both of the people in front of us pay with credit card. So it wasn't even like a cash transaction and like, oh, where'd it go? So then I'm like, huh. So then I look at the cashier and I just let everything go through. And the total came out to like it was something I don't forgive me, it's a shame I don't remember. It was like $72. Okay. Whatever it was like right around that. And I look at the cashier and I'm like, hey, has anybody come through here recently and say they'll drop some cash? And she's like, no. I'm like, huh. So I don't even look and I just hand her the money and it was folded up into quarters. And there was four $20 bills folded up. Now you got to think, this was back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So $80 was a lot of money back then. Today you can buy a banana, right? But back then it bought us the whole thing of groceries we needed. And then I had the $8 left over to tithe. So God gave us exactly enough money to buy the groceries we needed and to tithe. And it just showed me that God is always like with me. Like he's going to take care of the money. Don't worry about it. Like if I was like blowing money or being reckless or, oh, I need money to buy a 800 square inch TV, like that's crap. But if I needed food, he's going to provide it. And that's one of my favorite stories, to need $72 and get exactly 80. So I have enough to tithe and pay for the groceries.
That's incredible. I do love that because it just goes to show that, like, if you ask, God will provide, because it even does state that with the bare necessities too. So it seems as though you know so much about biblical stories. I would love to you to kind of tie this with some sort of biblical story if you can. You mentioned a little bit about when you bury it versus paying it forward or investing it. Can you tell a little bit more about those biblical stories to kind of put it into like a setting that is relatable for people today?
Yeah, I mean, oh man, there's so many. But what I mentioned before was there's the story in the Bible with the master, and then he has three servants, and he gives them all a talent, and one makes 5 talents, one makes 3 talents, and one just buries it. And then when the master comes back, like, hey, what did you do with the money I gave you? He's like, oh, I feared you, and I didn't want to lose your money, so I buried it. So the master was like, what? That's not what I told you to do. I told you to work. I told you to invest it. I told you to do your best. So that servant got disciplined. He took the money away and gave it to the guy who made 5, right? So today it's like, we don't want to be reckless with the resources God's given us, but we also shouldn't be afraid to take risks. And, men and women throughout the Bible, like Proverbs 31, he talks about the virtuous woman in Proverbs, right? She's investing and she's buying and she's making and she's trading and she's always using the resources God gave her and her husband and her have to make their lives better. And in the story of the Bible, one of the best, I think everybody should read it over and over again, especially if the you're having like any questions about what we talked about, like why would God allow this, or God did this to me. No, he didn't. He did not do it to you. And you need to read the story of Joseph, because Joseph was sold into slavery by his own brothers, went not just a few months, but I'd say estimate, different scholars say different things, but I think it's pretty easy that he was imprisoned and put in and out of different situations, which you can read about in the Bible, accused of everything falsely. The guy never did anything wrong, and yet he's constantly being, like one Potiphar's wife wanted to sleep with him. So the guy's like, no, and he runs away. And as he's running away, she takes his coat. Then she tells her husband, look, Joseph tried to rape me, and here's his coat to prove it. So the guy was thrown to prison. And then all these things happened to Joseph. And I actually don't want to tell you all the things that happened because you should read it. But at the end, it was 30 years of this guy being betrayed and abandoned. Well, he ends up finding the grace because everything he did prospered. And he ends up being like Pharaoh was like the top of the top, the king. And then underneath him was Joseph managing his affairs. So then when the famine hit, everybody was under Joseph, and his own family came under him, and he was able to help them stay alive when everybody else was dying from famine. So those 30 years that he couldn't understand, why did you allow this, God? How could this happen to me? I didn't do anything wrong. Why am I here? He's like, oh, I see it all. I'm such a fool. If this didn't happen to me, all of you would be dead. So thank you, God. And he had a true, amazing, grateful, thankful. He understood. Now, all of us in our lifetime won't understand. There's people, I always think Abraham Lincoln, he died thinking the Gettysburg Address was the worst speech he ever gave. And it's in the history books across the world as one of the greatest speeches ever given, right? So
Exactly.
we just need to be who God made us to be, but you never know where it's going to go. But the story of Joseph in the Bible is a beautiful, beautiful story. And if you're like, why does this stuff keep happening to me? That's a great place to start.
And also to follow up on that, it's like, why does these things keep happening to me? Another question could be, why aren't you listening to what God is trying to tell you? It's also about surrendering and trusting that God is in
Oh,
control because, I mean, as individuals, we are so accustomed to trying to figure out the next steps. And we're also so emotionally driven by whatever our idea of what life should be like. So we grasp onto this idea of what we believe our life should look like. But if we think about it, we were all created in the image of God. So what does it look like if we surrender to what that image was supposed to look like? Can you tell about a story in your life where you were completely grasping onto your idea of what should happen and what finally happened when you decided to surrender and what the benefits ended up being as that unfolded?
okay. So the first thing that came to my mind was something I'm not sure I'm ready to talk about on air. Not that I'm hiding anything, but I need to be 100% at peace with it. And
Completely understand.
I need to make sure I'm fully, how there's different levels of understanding? Like, oh, I get it. Oh, I get it. Oh, no, I really understand. I don't feel like my journey and the first thought I had is there. But ask that question again. Let me see what pops up next. No, I need to
I
rephrase
love the
reframe.
honesty. No, but I mean, isn't this kind of like there's this game where you keep saying things and then things pops up into your head, the first thing that comes into mind. Well, so I mean, essentially, you can tell any story you want. It doesn't have to be your favorite one. It can just be any story where you were kind of grasping on so hard to the idea of what you thought should happen in your life and what the next step would be. But when you finally surrendered and like God just let the story unfold, what does that look like for you?
All right, I'll talk about one recent with business and personal finances.
Okay.
So I had a goal in 2023. I had a situation where someone lied to me and cost me a ridiculous amount of money. I just got out of a terrible divorce and you know, it was sad, never, not what God wanted, not what I wanted, but it's what happened. And after fighting for 6 years to save the marriage, it was just time. It was time to stop. And right out of that, I had someone in a business transaction just completely lie, steal, cheat, and I could have went after them. And the attorney's like, "This is a slam dunk case," but I had to pay that attorney like 50 grand, and it's gonna take 2.5 years of my life. So I actually waited for the statute of limitations to run out. And I just told the person, you know the truth, you know what you did, you know where I live. You can get this right by sending a check for what you stole. If not, may God give you 10 times what you've done, good or bad. And they knew what they did was bad. So then that left me in a huge hole financially. So I had to make all the normal income to live off of, all the money to start restoring what was stolen from me from the divorce, right? Because I just, at that point, I wanted to live. I didn't care about money. So I just pretty much walked away from everything. And then now on top of it, I have this massive, what seemed to me, to a famous movie star, it's nothing. To someone who's homeless, $100 is a lot. So everything's perspective.
Right.
But for most people, the amount of money I'm talking was pretty damn significant. They'd be like, yeah, it's about 3 times the average American salary, right? So I have this huge deficit and I'm killing myself, Maggie, killing myself, working like 80 hours a week. And we're not built to work that much all the time. Okay. I'm a believer in work hard, but to be working for like 2 years straight, 80 hours a week, trying to catch up. And I'm like putting it like, if I work, I make money. If I don't work, I don't make money. Well, there's a common sense, you reap what you sow, and that's a truth. But it's also not about me, it's about God. So I remember it was coming down and I'm in November and there was still this massive deficit and I was behind schedule to make the money. But God just kept saying, Dave, I love you. Just keep doing your best. It's going to work out. And then it doesn't have to be from you working. It might be from sources you never considered. And I was programmed, you don't work, you don't make money. And there is, again, Bible truth. If a man doesn't work, he shouldn't eat, right? And a man, what kind of scumbag are you if you don't take care of your own home first? So all these things are going through my head. But in November, it was finally like, God doesn't need me. I mean, I got to do my best, but I was doing way more than my best. I was killing myself. So I actually backed off, relaxed. And then on December 12th, I won't forget that date, I looked at my finances and I think there was like from November to December, there was another 60,000 or 80,000 I needed. And it worked. It came in. So not only did I finish the year paying off, I didn't end up with like 18 million bucks in the bank, but I didn't have any debt. Everything was paid. And I had this peace. And I'm not kidding, like overnight almost. I think it was no longer than a week. I dropped like 20 pounds and I felt fantastic. And it just showed me like, hey, I'm here. You have to do your part, but I bring the increase, right? God brings the increase. So I just was like, and I had total peace and no stress. And I felt great from that time until like February, March of the next year. And then I start bringing it back in and getting stressed and worrying about money. So I'm like, no, so that's a struggle I have to stay in, to maintain that balance.
Mm.
But to your listeners, you got to work and you got to do your best. But remember, God brings the increase and he will always provide. He's not going to leave. I will never leave you nor forsake you, he says. So he won't. He promises it. It's going to happen.
Yeah. It's not always a timeline in which we want, and it might not look in the means that we might believe that it is, but God will always provide us with what we need, and abundantly so.
So just so that I understand your takeaway fully here is that it's kind of when you allowed yourself to surrender and let God just kind of take over, because you had already kind of been hustling, you had been working hard, you've kind of been giving it your all, but somehow in that too, like you said, you were given more than what was kind of expected of you, I suppose, like more than what would be required or whatnot. I know that God doesn't really, it's not like you have to work for what God provides, but I mean, to some extent, yeah, you're supposed to be working on for your living. But the takeaway from the story here is that when you let God also take a part of the battle, then increase happens. In your own words, that's when the abundance happens. That's when you'll get the blessings and more.
Yeah, and to be more specific, pride isn't when you think you're the best. Pride is anytime you're focused on yourself. So people who are like, "I'm nothing, I'm worthless, I'm a piece of crap." I struggle with that my whole life, right? That's pride. Another form of pride is, "I'm the best, I'm the greatest," you know? I won't say any names. But, you got pride is, "I'm the best." The pride is, "I'm the worst." Pride is, "I have to get this done." And that's where I was at. I gotta work. I gotta make this money. No, that's pride. So what God was showing me is it was just a form of pride. I need to surrender it. Like you said earlier, I need to give it to God. Again, I need to do my best. I need to plan. Like there's times that Jesus says, don't worry about tomorrow. You know, God knows what you need. He's going to provide it. But then there's other times where it talks about you'd be a fool if you didn't plan ahead. So God's not giving you two different messages, but he's telling you the truth, what's throughout the Bible. Balance. By faith is throughout the Bible. That's how you're saved. By faith, right? Because if you believe God's real, that doesn't save you. Even the demons believe God's real, but they didn't trust him. So by faith are ye saved through grace. It's the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. That's in Romans. So by faith, by trusting God, we're saved. And that same principle is what we need to balance in our whole life. So when we are looking at a huge deficit in finances or a huge health problem, I'm going to die, okay, here's the problem. Here's where I'm at. Reverse engineer the plan, how to get the solution, and then work every day towards it. That's all you can do. Don't stress about it. Don't double down on the effort. Just be and find joy and peace in everything you're doing. And God will find a way. And then with health, I know people who've struggled. My grandmother died in front of me of cancer the first 5 years of my life. I have family members and friends who died of cancer. And you think, well, why did they have that? Why weren't they healed? I don't know. I don't know. I know I've been critically ill a couple times, and I don't ever want to be sick again, Maggie. I'm not going to lie to you. I do not want to go through what I've gone through. But and I'm thankful that I went through what I did in the past. But I'd be a liar to tell you I want to do it again, right? But no matter what we're going through, we can only do our best. And if we keep thinking it's all about us to solve the problem, we're proud. We've lost sight of it. We may not even intentionally be proud, but it's a form of pride. If you think God needs you to do something, you're way out of touch.
Yeah, that's you're really blowing my mind a little bit in a good way, because I just feel like what you're saying is like I can grasp this concept so easily. I think some things that I've struggled with a lot when it comes to religion growing up, and it's just understanding the message and what the big picture is. Like what is the Bible actually trying to communicate? And I think you're doing a good job of being a communicator, and I just enjoy listening to you.
In the next episode of Becoming Secure with Mike's Mindset, David and I tie generational trauma and attachment theory to faith and healing. Until then, stay curious and get to know yourself better.
If you want to come share your version of how your attachment style manifested itself in your love life, please email me on maxmindset@gmail.com. I can't wait to hear from you.